So, welcome to another episode of the Business of Hearing podcast. And today's guest is part speaker, part provocateur, and part lion tamer. And Nigel Risner is the creator of the zookeeper communication model used in boardrooms, classrooms, prisons, all arenas across the world. And if you've ever struggled to communicate with your team, your partner, and even your kids, then I think you'll find this episode especially interesting. So Nigel, you joined us a couple of weeks ago as we're recording this at Inner Circle Live 2025 in London, and you delivered a session around this almost the animal kingdom zookeeper communication model that has been very, very well regarded, very popular, and I've heard a lot of people now comparing themselves to lions and elephants, which has been a lot of fun. But I suppose
that's amazing that when you talk about communication. What you want to be able to do with communication, excuse me, is you want to share a message and hope it gets not only remembered, but repeated. So if you share a message, bearing in mind that most people don't, it's going to sound ironic who the audience is, they don't listen and hear very well at the best of times. So you're sharing a message and you know they're not going to hear all of the message. Then you know they're going to might try and repeat it, and they're going to repeat it at 80% of the level they even heard it. So most people only hear 80% of the communication. Then they repeat what they think they've heard, which is another 80%. That means most communication, when it gets repeated to a third party, is only 64% of the original message. If you really understand the people you're talking to, and you understand they are different animals, and there are many, many different models for communication, whether it's Myers-Briggs, Insight, oh my God, DISC, there are just hundreds. And the problem is, whenever I work with an audience, and I've trained quite a lot of communication specialists, and halfway through any audience, I normally say to them, so do you know my style? And they'll kind of go, well, you're extrovert. Well, that's pretty obvious because I'm a motivational speaker, a bit like Phil. But it's the next bits that really matter. And if you know exactly what to say, but to the wrong person, 75% of the message gets missed. So you might have all the right words to you. And we joked about this before we came on air, Ali, that I'm married to a massive, massive elephant. I mean, she's beautiful. She's a size 12. She's a psychotherapist. We've been married 40 years. And there are many times she asks me a very simple question, and I don't give her enough detail. So she thinks I'm just a maverick. I'm an idiot. I haven't listened carefully. I don't understand her. And that's because my brain isn't thinking, what does she need to hear? So when she says, what time are you flying? And what time are you landing? And I go, about 7. She'll say, but you told me you were going to be home for dinner at 7. Well, I'm landing at 7. It's, how long can it take me to get through security and to go through passport control and then find my car and then go around the M25 or go on the freeway? Of course, I'm now not home till 9. So my wife now knows I've lied. I'm not a considerate husband. And the list goes on. And all I need to do is to listen because she needs exact information. Now, the reverse is we won't describe what our podcast title was called on our internal message, but it was about breasts and chocolate, if you remember.
I do.
And because that got my attention, because there was only 2 words, that's all I need. And I thought I could do that. My wife looked at the message and said, is this a sex tape? Because to her, she'd like more detail and doesn't get the message. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So we really need to understand if it's clients we're working with, patients we're working with, staff we're working with, children we're working with, what's their primary animal trait? Now, I don't know if you're married or you've got kids or you look too young to all that. Do you have kids?
I have kids and I'm married.
Okay. So your first child, when it was born, and it was a special occasion, and there were pictures done, and we all made sure everything was done. And the baby, after literally when it's 3 or 4 days old, it cried, and within 8 seconds, you're in that room.
Yep.
Then after a while, someone tells you don't need to be there that quickly, so you wait 2 minutes, okay? And then eventually you start building it up. But it's a small human being, and it's precious. And the first child, it's so integral to your life that they feel very spoilt. So they have what I call lion and elephant tendencies. They get everything they want right now in the moment, and it's specific. The milk formula and the heater and the way the room temperature is done, it's all like that. When you have 2 or 3 children, the second child, if we even remember to take pictures, we don't measure out the milk product exactly the same because we know the way it is. And if it falls over, we just tell them to get up. And they are much more what I call monkey dolphin children. Now, people go to me, well, it can't be for everyone. No, it's not every time. But if I looked at a majority of audiences that I work with, and I've spoken to more than 4 million people, 90% of people would agree that their first child is much more uptight and the
Mm,
second child is much more relaxed. And that's partly because of the way they're brought up.
mm.
Now, if you then go into the workplace, and sometimes I'll ask a certain question, I'll know if they're a first or second child. I'll know if they're a twin. Sometimes I can even go further and I'll know what's going on with their parents and whether they're an only child. And that really confuses people. And it's because of the language that's used at a very young age. So the
Mm.
work that Phil and I do combines together, but it's separate in another way. That once you know exactly what to say to the right animal, you have a success beyond belief. You
Gotcha.
could sell 80% of more stuff at much better margins and you would never need to discount. Just think about that. If you knew which was the right animal and exactly what to say. But if you get one or two of the other way round, you can't you can't persuade an elephant very quickly to buy something because they
Okay.
want detail, they want references, they want to go to 4 different hearing aid clinics, they want to go on What Hearing Monthly. I'm sure there's a magazine, What Hearing Monthly. There's a What Monthly for every other product. And if you rush them, they then feel trapped in a corner. And you know what happens when an animal gets trapped? They either charge or get scared.
Mm, interesting. So just help us understand this, Nigel. Like the 4 different animals, because you've referenced them all there, apart from one, I believe. Just give us a bit of a short, snappy version of each, so we can.
That's so funny. I did mention all 4, but I knew you didn't listen properly. That's monkey
I missed
behavior.
the dolphin.
Yes. um, so lions are traditionally single-minded, straightforward, no messing about. And if they have an appointment at 9 o'clock, the appointment needs to start at 5 to 9 because 9 o'clock is late. Just think about that.
Mm,
That they are structured people who need their lives looked after first. They don't care about the rest of the world, it's about them. And I don't know what the latest hearing aid equipment is, but they want the newer one.
mm.
That's a bit like the iPhone 18, which hasn't come out yet, but they're waiting for it because that's much better than all the other iPhones, even though they're only going to use about a 50th of the product. Then you
Gotcha.
got the monkeys, and I'm a classic monkey where I need it to be fun. I need very short bites, very little information, and there's a good chance I'm going to forget to turn up for the appointment because something else shiny will turn up, and it could be as simple as chocolate or something else. It won't be something sophisticated, and I'll buy quite quickly if I can have it done there and then.
Mm,
So if I was going to a dentist, I do a lot of dentist work. There's no chance they're going to do a retainer and have a system and then play and put in creams every day for 6 months. But if someone could do my teeth in under 5 seconds, I'd pay 20,000.
yep.
I'm never going to follow a system. So if you have patients where they need to come back 3 or 4 times to check the hearing and to check the sound and check the cochlear implant and all that stuff, unlikely monkeys are going to follow through.
Mm,
Then you have the elephants, who are sophisticated learners and who know more about the hearing industry than you do. Doesn't matter you've been in it 30 years, they've read a book, What Hearing Monthly. They've read, and their auntie also had a hearing aid in 1972, so they now think they know more information. And most of the time they actually do, because they've researched it beyond belief, and it's no use trying to bullshit an elephant because they'll see right through it. They will delay making a decision, but once they've made the decision, it's phenomenal. And
interesting.
then you have the dolphins who are nurturing and caring and supportive, and they want to make sure your hearing's okay as well as mine. So it's not just about me, it's about you and how are your family and how are your children. And they might even bring someone else into the appointment because little Johnny or Sally might need to be checked because they once didn't hear you say, come down for dinner. They now think they've got a hearing issue. Every child under 11 doesn't hear come down for dinner if they're playing on the Xbox. So there's lots of appointments for dolphin children. When you then understand that your role is to be the zookeeper and to manage them and give them what they need. And so elephants don't need reminders for appointments. They know. Lions will be there before you're there. Monkeys are going to invariably be late because something else will have turned up. And the dolphins would like a reminder just so it makes them feel loved. And so you don't have to do that much extra work if you know the animal you're dealing with. The problem is we are lazy, so we just send out thousands of reminders and we send thousands of texts and we do thousands of appointments. You could do less work and earn more money if you knew the style of the animal you're dealing with. The same as when I talk about when you know the personal needs of your staff,
Mm.
you could give them less money and then work twice as hard if they got their needs met.
Okay. Well, let's
So the
break this down.
so the two are combined, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, because I like the idea if patient comes through the door, if you don't understand what animal they are, you can communicate much better. Is there any telltale signs to quickly be able to categorize people? If maybe you've got this super skill, having done this to 4 million people, to get that 2-minute read on people, but is there
Well,
any
so
signs?
lions are going to want an early appointment. They're not going to want to do it during the middle of the day because they've got more important things to do, or it might be last thing at night. But they want to be seen on time, and they're going to come in, and they're not going to be over friendly. And when you say to them, we're a few minutes behind, you will watch their reaction. I've made it. Why can't you?
Mm.
We had an appointment for 9 o'clock, and already you as the operator, the principal, is on the back foot. So if you knew they were lions, you should make sure you've got 5 minutes beforehand to go to the toilet, have a coffee, so when they walk in, you are fresh. They don't want to hear about your problems. I don't care. About one of my staff has gone down, and the equipment, and it's a very hot day. I presume you're in the UK today.
I am.
Pretty hot, wouldn't you agree?
It's unbearable.
Yeah, but as for a lion, that's just the weather. Get over it.
Yeah.
And so when you watch a lion walk in, it's no different to a lion walking into a restaurant. I have at my table 7, it's my normal table. We're just clearing it. But you knew I was coming in at 7. Why isn't it clear?
Mm.
So I have a lot of friends who are lions, by the way,
Yeah.
and they want a specific table at the time. And when you say just go to the bar and have a drink, what you're really saying to them is we're just not ready and we're not that good, so we're going to try and earn a bit more money from you. That's what they hear. That's not what you've said.
Mm. Interesting.
Then monkeys will come in and they'll share about everything else but about their hearing. And they'll start telling you stories, and they can't remember where they parked their car, and they'll be 4 minutes late. And I walked into my dentist, seriously, not that long ago, eating a bar of chocolate. I've gone in with chocolate in my hand and offered it to my dentist, who said, probably not the thing you should be offering, but thank you very much indeed. It didn't even enter my head. That's probably the wrong thing.
Brilliant.
I mean, it's a bit like going to a hearing clinic and you've got headphones on with music blaring, wondering why it hurts your ears. To me, it was like I had no idea. And monkeys mean well. We just got other things going on because I'm not saying we've all got ADHD because that's just an excuse, but a lot of us have got ADHD,
Yep.
and so we've got so much going on. And so when you then say we've got an appointment in 2 weeks just to follow up, I haven't listened. There's not a chance I'm turning up. We're the ones who need reminders. We're the ones who need a phone call. Oh, she loves me. That's nice. Elephants are going to be there early for their appointment with probably some literature.
Mm.
You won't have to remind them, and they're going to sit very quietly reading a magazine. And you can keep them a few minutes, provided someone gives them an explanation. They'll be okay with it. But you can't just leave an elephant just sitting there, not telling them what's going on. So they'll come in. We're so sorry, about 10 minutes behind. No problem at all. Is everything okay? Yep, no problem. And after 5 minutes, just remind them, should be being in about 5 minutes, and they'll be fine. But they'll have literature with them and get ready to answer lots of questions. The dolphins, bless them, are going to come in and check on your health first, make sure you're okay. And in this heat, they'll probably bring an extra bottle of water for you. Just make sure you're okay. And it's because they're so interested in making sure you're loved, so you'll love them back.
Mm.
Sometimes it's conditional. It's quite weird. I'm going to love you, but I'd like a little bit of it back. So if I'll acknowledge you on the basis you look at me and go, well, you're looking very brand, you're looking very healthy, Nigel. Oh, thank you so much indeed. That's very kind. And so it's a bit like, do you ever go to the hairdressers?
Yep.
If I asked a client, do you have a regular appointment? Elephants will definitely have a 3 o'clock on a Saturday in their diary scheduled. Lions only see the senior stylist. Monkeys, we go whenever we can be asked. Okay. And the
Yep.
Dolphins will go after school with one of their children. So they're not going to go on their own because that's selfish. So I often will ask questions to people, knowing they're going to nearly give me the answer of which animal they are.
Interesting.
Now, what all of your subscribers could do is literally get a piece of paper and start thinking about the different qualities. And when someone becomes a new patient, ask them which category do they fit in. I'm just trying to think in one of my books, which you may have seen.
Yep.
That page, which I know everyone can't see, if they got every patient to just look at that and tell them what animal they were, they'd save so much time. You're asking them questions. Where do they live? How old are they? Are they married? Just say, which animal are you?
Almost a pre-appointment survey. Like,
Well,
I'm sure we could package this.
You're doing all this stuff. It would take 1 second. We do it with some of our hotel clients. When they check in, we ask them to fill in that, just to look at the scheme. Monkeys don't need an upgrade. Lions want an upgrade. Elephants want the room they originally booked. And dolphins want to make sure there's interconnecting doors. And so it's not that complicated.
Yeah.
Lions want to be served and they want breakfast at 7:01. Elephants don't mind, providing there's a time schedule, and monkeys aren't going to follow it anyway. They'll come in whenever they will because they haven't read the schedule. So hotels, when they find out the animal time, it helps them.
Yeah.
For your hearing patients and clients, it will just save so much time.
Yep. Absolutely. So this is interesting as it comes down to leadership, right? And, I can't help but think there's a lot of practices listening right now that very much have a zoo within their business. Different staff who are different animals, who are difficult to control, or difficult to feed.
No, they're not difficult. They're different. There's the real thing about language. People aren't difficult. They're just different. They become difficult because you haven't treated them in their style.
Gotcha. So let's delve into that a little bit.
Difficult clients. There are different clients. They only become difficult when you don't notice their differences.
Okay. So I suppose the question that leads on to that is, like, what advice do we have for someone who's leading a mixed zoo? Somebody who has different animals.
Brilliant question, because you nearly always are. If you had a whole team of lions, it would be real trouble. And if you had a whole team of monkeys, it would be lots of fun, but nothing would get done. So what you've got to structure is, if you had a team meeting at the beginning of the day, the lions only need 17 minutes. Just give them bottom line information. The monkeys, it needs to be fun. And that's why I always joke, you need to have a CBO, a chief biscuit officer. There needs to be some biscuits that are nice. I need to have some fun with it. The elephants, they need to have some notes in advance about what the meeting might be about. And the dolphins just want to make sure all of us can work together. So what we need to understand is that different strokes, different folks, but some of the senior consultants and some of the principals will be lions. It's their business. They're paying a lot of salaries. They're paying rent. They're paying rates, etc. And they don't have time to mess about. And providing they're given the information in what I call total truth. So I have a phrase, you'll like this, TTTTF. Tell the total truth faster. When lions get the total truth, they're calm. But very often we're scared of lions because of their reaction. So we don't share the total truth. Then they find out and then they roar. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense.
Lions can deal with uncertainty. They can deal with this stuff, provided you tell them the total truth. So if you're leading a team, and just remember that you lead people and you manage things. So if you're leading the team, are you giving them in very short bursts what they need? Lions and monkeys can't be in meetings for too long. Elephants can be there for days. As long as you give them some water, they'll be very happy. And there's some paperwork. So you need to think about, what's the purpose of the meeting? Is it for the lions and monkeys to do something different? Or is it to collaborate better? If it's to collaborate better, you don't need that long. But there's one thing that's really key, which I've left out, that if the lion, who's the principal, trusts his staff, life works. But very often the lion thinks he can do it on his own.
Mm.
You know, I might as well just make the appointment myself. You know, I'll see them myself. You can leave. I'll just do it myself. And what really happens, the other three animals feel they're not trusted. And when you don't feel trusted, you have low self-esteem. And when you have low self-esteem, you get those results. So people with high self-esteem produce great results, and people with high results have high self-esteem. But I'm going to go back a step. People with high self-esteem are willing to take risks because they're not scared of the consequence. People with low self-esteem will sit back and wait because they don't want to get into trouble. So if you look at the lions and they start micromanaging, which is what they're good at doing, that they just look over your shoulder. I just want to see what you're doing here. What you're really saying is, I don't trust you. So imagine, Ollie, you sent me a note that said, "Can we do 10 o'clock?" And I went, "Yes." So I just trusted you. And if you remember, I was waiting for you at 9:57, waiting for you. You didn't have to send me 9 reminders. You didn't have to do this or other because we trusted each other. But if you didn't trust me and I'd been late 3 times before, we'd have had issues.
Absolutely.
And so what happens is, at some point, what the animals have to do, what the zookeeper has to do is to clear with his staff what's going on. How old is your child?
I got a 3-year-old and a 9-year-old.
Okay. So your 9-year-old occasionally messes up.
Yep.
And what happens is you don't say that much until he starts bullying the 3-year-old.
Very true.
And then what happens is you go a bit crazy. And the 9-year-old goes, "It wasn't that big a deal." Because what you've done is you're angry about other stuff and brought it into that argument. So we have a phrase in our house called "It's not about the spoons." I'll explain this because this is really key for your surgeries and practices. Friday nights in our house are very important. We have lots of people for dinner. My wife does the chicken soup, she does roast chicken, she does vegetables, she does desserts. And my wife asked me to get bowls out for the desserts. So I bring out bowls and she's just about to serve desserts and there are no spoons on the table. And my wife loses her cool with me. And a friend of ours who's also a psychotherapist just whispered in my ears, "It's not about the spoons." This fight was not about the spoons. This is about that I don't listen. She asked me about have a check the table. Was I going to be home on time and everything else? And now this is just a nail, whatever the phrase is.
Yeah.
The straw that breaks the camel's back.
Yeah.
And that happens a lot in practices. We put up with a lot because it's not that big a deal. The problem is it becomes a big deal over something tiny and then we explode. And in relationships, it happens a lot. I said, I've been married 40 years. You'd think I'd get my act together. I think every couple should be in couples therapy before they need couples therapy. Every leader should have coaching and should be studying with Phil before they need to study with Phil. What we nearly do is we nearly wait till we've got problems with the practice and then we study. We nearly wait till we're about to break up in relationships and then we go to couples counseling.
So true.
It's the same in business. We need to understand that when you tell the total truth and you share and you clear with people. So when my wife says, "Look, I just need to clear with you that, we've got 2 kids and we've got 4 grandchildren. When they come over, you can't just have a quick meeting on a Zoom call in the middle of the afternoon. If you know they're all coming over, I need some help." Instead of just throwing herself into my office, losing her cool, because it's too late now. I'm now in the middle of a call.
Yep.
But that's what happens in practices. That's what happens in work. When leaders learn to clear. So I used to, with my PA, every single Friday, clear with her what worked this week. And she would then say what she hadn't done completed this week. So let me just repeat that. I tell her what worked. And she would tell me what she hadn't completed this week. Because I didn't want her going home not thinking I knew what was going on. And 2, she didn't want to be thinking he might find out. So now we knew it hadn't got completed. The next question is, what support do you need next week to make sure the work gets done? So we knew what had gone well. What hadn't we completed? I just couldn't get that invoice out. Something happened. Okay, now I know. But I don't want to find out on Wednesday the following week when the client's coming in for a big treatment, we haven't sent an invoice out.
Mm.
But you can only do that if they've got high self-esteem and they feel they can be supported with the person. No one hates being thrown under the bus. No one hates being bollocked. No one hates being told off. And I shared this on the day. Nobody likes feedback because we don't hear it as positive. That's why I use the word feed forward.
Mm.
So I'm going to share something that doesn't work. I'm going to support you. What would really work next time is, but the minute I say a bit of feedback for you, a bit of feedback, 98% of people just die inside a little bit.
Mm. The one thing that you mentioned, and I think you may not even remember mentioning this, you may do, it was quite a subtle thing that you mentioned, but I know a lot of people have made adjustments off the back of it, is even the attention span, morning to afternoon. For an appointment-based business where you're giving a lot of information to someone to make a significant decision around the future of their hearing health, it's interesting how attention spans differ in mornings and afternoons. Could you give us a bit of context on that? Because I've seen
Okay, I'm so
restructure.
glad you shared this because this is the thing I'm known for more than anything else in the world, in my humble opinion. The phrase is, if you're in the room, be in the room. And the tragedy is in the mornings, and if you talk about a regular 9 to 6 day, because
Mm.
I know people work different hours, but between 9 and 11, you're quite on it. You started the day, you've had a coffee, you've had your Red Bull Light, you've had an energy drink, Huel, or whatever it might be, and you're quite ready for it. But still, you can only be in the room about 42 minutes. And if you remember, when I worked with you guys, even though it was an afternoon, I did a break for 6 minutes after 42 minutes. And
Yep.
there were two reasons for that. They'd been in the room quite some time before me. And it was brilliant, the stuff that Phil did. So I'm not knocking what Phil did. But imagine after Phil had done all his brilliance, I then continued speaking. It's just too much information. And I know that. And I want to be brilliant. And I want them to remember my key messages. It's lovely to hear they did. But part of the reason is in the afternoon, people can only be in the room about 30 minutes. And by 4 o'clock, your brain is frazzled. So imagine you're doing a brand new patient and you're explaining about the complexities of the hearing aid and how it's going to work. And it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon and they've come straight from work. The chance of them taking in all that information, and then you're saying to them, "What's the average price of a hearing aid at the moment?"
We'll put $7,000.
Okay, just think about this. So it's 4:30. The person's been up at 7 in the morning because they had to leave work. So leave their home, go to work. They've done a full day's work. They've rushed to you. It's 4:15. You've done the examination. You start showing them some equipment, and then you start saying it's about $7,000. I'm knackered at this point.
Mm.
What I'm going to say is, just give me some information, and I'll let you know in the next couple of days.
Absolutely.
I'll put money on appointments after 4:30. If you know they've worked, your conversion rate is probably 25%.
Mm. Interesting. And I'm seeing
So,
practices restructure schedule, like less time in the afternoons, longer appointments in the
but
morning.
also for you,
Mm.
you're working
Yeah.
with your staff. The last thing anybody wants at 5:30 is a team meeting. Let's all get together and find out how the day went. At 5:30, I want to go home.
Yeah. It's so true.
And so what we have to make a decision really quickly is, but there are some people, and Phil might be the opposite to me. So
Mm.
imagine Phil and I in a room. I'm a 7 o'clock in the morning till 2 o'clock person.
Yeah.
Phil might be a 2 o'clock till 10 o'clock person. So it's not right or wrong. It's just knowing the quality of the people you're dealing with and what their time is. I was asked to do some work in California a couple of weeks ago, and we didn't start the session till 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and they wanted 3.5 hours. And like a fool, I said, okay.
Mm.
I've got to tell you, I've done 700 chief exec groups. I wouldn't rebook me based on the session I did.
Mm.
I should never have said yes. It was the wrong time of day. And I appreciate that was the only time I could because it was California, but it was just nuts. Or I should have had it, I should have gone to sleep in the morning and woken up at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I'd already been up. I'd walked the
Yeah.
dog at 6:30 in the morning because of the heat. So we sometimes don't help ourselves and we get in our own way.
Mm.
So when you know your own body and when you know your time schedules and when you know how long it takes you to be out of the room, I mean, we've been speaking for 31 minutes right now, okay?
Yep.
In about 9 minutes, two of us are going to drift, okay?
Yep.
And this is in the morning. At 4 o'clock
true.
in the afternoon, there's not a chance.
Yeah.
But we do this a lot because we're trying to appease the patients and we're not supporting them, we're not supporting our staff. So I'm not saying you can't have afternoon appointments,
Yep.
but you've got to really think about if it's a brand new client and they're coming in from work. And these are some of the questions some of your receptionists should be doing,
Mm.
who are rather director of first impressions, because I'd much prefer that phrase. You know, the director of first impressions wants to be thinking about how do we make the best time for them? How do we support them? Have we got some nice biscuits? Have we got some water for them? I have an accountancy firm I work with that give people a drinks menu.
Beautiful.
Very few people have ever drunk champagne, but it's on there. But they all talk about it.
Mm.
You know, instead of tea or coffee,
Yep.
can I get you a coffee?
So true.
That's just the way people talk. So I'm just saying we need to start really examining who are our patients
Mm.
and who's the person, the consultant, the specialist seeing them, and is it a good match? I'd be phenomenal meeting someone at 7 in the morning for a hearing aid consultation. I'd be the wrong person at 4 o'clock, especially if it was a brand new client.
So
And
this
when
is
you start talking
interesting.
about the sums of money, and you know that in the afternoon you're not going to get the same repeat rate, you could charge more to see them early in the morning.
Mm.
You can have hourly rates. If everyone wants to come at 7 in the morning, just up your fees.
Mm. Absolutely. So if a practice leader is listening to this right now and they're like, well, I need to know what animal I am. I need to know what animal my team is. What's the best process for them to learn that?
So there's two different ones. There's a free concept. They can just go to my website, and there are two different quizzes on my website. And they need to look at both because sometimes they'll fill in the first one and they'll always come out of line because they like that. They like some of the answers better. But do both tests. If they then want to invest in getting a book, it's a zoo around here, they can. And if they really want to go crazy, we have a personality assessment tool, which is so in depth that people think I've slept with them. Because I get that, because the information is just so phenomenal.
Mm.
Well, it will show why people react to you in a certain way and why you do what you do and what your strengths and weaknesses are. So it's levels of investment from nothing to about $75.
Okay.
You really want to make sure your team are communicating well.
Amazing. Look, Nigel, I appreciate your time greatly. Appreciate you making
Pleasure.
34 minutes. I think we've just kept it in the right
There you
level
go.
of
And
attention.
hopefully I'll be in Toronto with you next year.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Based on how well received your session was, then I think it'll be in great demand.
Cool. I look forward to seeing you very soon. If I can support you, just ask, my friend. Be good.
Thanks, Nigel. Appreciate your time.
Thanks.